This is Farm Journal's Margie Fisher. I'm with Brian Spangler from the Indiana Spray Center. Brian, out here today at Soybean College, you were talking about sprayer calibration. Just tell me the importance of making sure farmers get hands-on with their machine.
Sure. Today we tried to focus on managing the sprayer from the spray boom down. So lots of variables that go into that, similar to what Missy speaks about when managing soybeans. There's different areas of soybeans that you manage throughout the year. Just like the sprayer, there's tips to manage, there's gauges to manage, there's pressure manifolds to manage, flow meters to manage, just all kinds of things to go into making sure your sprayer is calibrated and that it's putting the right amount of product in the target and nowhere else.
You talk about sprayer tips. What are some of the top takeaways that farmers got from your presentation with tips?
Yeah, great question. A lot of guys didn't realize that their tips wear perhaps as much as they do. The product that tips are made out of, stainless steel overwhelmingly was the top choice before the meeting that guys thought would be the best wearing tip. But surprising to most of them, a poly, a very simple product, poly tip, and is a much better wear tip that's cheaper. And so guys walked away thinking, you know what, I could save some money. I'm spending money on expensive tips that wear quicker. So was probably a big home run for them in that regard.
You did some work with the spray table during this session, and tell me an interesting point that you made about beakers.
Starting to get guys used to the fact that you can do simple things in your shop, whether it be a spray table or whether it be a hydrant with a reducer out of your well. In the wintertime, when you're not under the gun to spray, you can do a lot of calibration and testing of nozzles in the comfort of your own shop. We happen to use a spray table, which is set up with a pressure gauge and different things. But we wanted to show the group today that just simple measurements, we need to make sure that those are accurate. We took two beakers. One was full of water, or had 30 ounces of water, for example. Poured it into the second beaker and got about 28 ounces. So where was the variability at? One beaker was a flat, more of a flat standard, just jug, just a container, where the other one was more of a chemistry type, precise beaker, and not so much one being right or one being wrong, but just making sure that you know what you're using to measure and calibrate, because if it's not accurate, then your calibration at the end would not be.
Your group then headed out to the sprayer with some catch cans, stopwatches, calculators to try to figure out what was going on across the boom. You spoke about variability. When you experience variability in your spray tips, how can you proceed to calibrate?
Yeah, great question. So we had 3 different tips that we looked at. The idea that Farm Journal and I talked about prior to the meeting was get guys up out of the chair and used to doing something and see that it's not hard, it's not a scary thing, just doing some catching. So the tips that were on the sprayer, there were a couple of used tips that the farmer brought in, Jim brought in for us, and then I put a new set on yesterday, and we tested the water, measured the water coming through those tips to see exactly what was the sprayer doing. Were there some tips that Jim had that perhaps were wore, and was our tip that we put on perfect because it was new? Well, so surprisingly, Jim's tips weren't as wore as we thought they would be, and the tips that we put on weren't as perfect as we thought they would be. So the takeaway was either I was a liar and we didn't put new tips on last night, or perhaps there were some other things like flow meter and check valves and other calibrations on the sprayer that perhaps could have some improvement, because out of 12 groups, all but one had a variable new nozzle that wasn't putting out the right rate, which we know would be incorrect. So just a real live view of all the things we talked about in the tent out on the sprayer.
And we couldn't cut this conversation short unless we talked about safety with our spraying system.
Safety is often overlooked, something we can skip over or don't want to hear any more about. You know, we think we know everything, and everybody can be reminded every day of safety, whether it be driving a pickup down the highway or using a sprayer, and just the idea of protection of gloves and hat, or long sleeves, long pants, trying not to touch chemicals and then touch a cell phone or a mouth. Be patient, take your time, use common sense, nothing earth-shattering, just some good reminders.
Perfect. Hey Brian, thanks for being part of our event.
We're glad to be